Hello and welcome. When asked which is better, either The Dark Knight Returns or Watchmen, my answer is usually, Watchmen is the best mainstream comic about the effect of a superhero. Dark Knight is the best mainstream action story with superheroes. Watchmen is intellectual, whereas Dark Knight is visceral. Watchmen humanizes the superhero. Dark Knight mythologizes the superhero. One is tragic, the other operatic. These two contemporary works taken together seemingly encompass the total potential of the genre, and they utilize the unique attributes of the medium to great effect. In other words, one is not better than the other because they serve different purposes. They actually complement one another. Of all the phases of Batman's history, The Dark Knight Returns is possibly the most influential story on the character itself. The personality traits and the overall dire seriousness of the character endure to this day. The pure psychosis is toned down somewhat, but the overall crusade against crime, which Batman is unable and unwilling to quit, is still ongoing. It's become one of the major parts of the Batman mythology. The groundwork for this transformative work was laid by Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams in the early 70s. The 60s TV show had influenced the comic book character to be outrageous and campy, which had its interesting moments, but it was damaging to the core concept overall. In essence, O'Neil and Adams reclaimed the character. They made him respectable and iconic once again. Of course, due to the era and the intended audience, there was only so much that creative team could accomplish. Regardless, it set a foundation and a benchmark for the character until the late 80s. Originally, The Dark Knight Returns was planned as a single graphic novel. Very early into production, this was expanded into 3 48-page issues: The Dark Knight Returns, The Dark Knight's Revenge, and Death of the Dark Knight. Due to the scope of the series, this was expanded into a 4th issue, and the titles dramatically changed: The Dark Knight Returns, The Dark Knight Triumphant, Hunt for the Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Falls. What remains intact is the concept of this being a complete graphic novel. It had a distinct beginning, middle, and end, and the finale felt conclusive. Remarkably, the same year The Dark Knight was being worked on, Miller was also working on Elektra Lives, Elektra Assassin, and Daredevil Love and War. In very broad thematic strokes, the story of Dark Knight is this: Batman reconciles himself. He then takes control of Gotham. Then he defeats chaos. Then he conquers America. All of this is to install a sense of order on a world that has seemingly descended into chaos. The Dark Knight Returns is also a satire of a media-saturated world. It's a world where touchy-feely solutions are discussed and implemented, but they have no real-world effect. The media is a sideshow. It's a carnival of small talking heads, utilizing a medium that seems to lend credibility to their chatter just because they can speak into a camera with a level of authority. Furthermore, nearly every talking head is a straw man. They are shallow and almost meaningless. Within the confines of that medium, no one has a story arc. They do not develop whatsoever. They are insubstantial projections of people entering the world at 24 frames a second. This element also works to fill out the world of the Dark Knight and to give it context and texture. It gives both Gotham and America a voice. At the beginning, Bruce Wayne is suicidal. He's lost his purpose. There is no reason for him to continue existing. The opening scene, where he ejects from a fiery car crash, sets this up. He's looking to die. Quite possibly, Batman won't let him. My own unfounded speculation is that Bruce Wayne begins the infamous sentence, but it's Batman that finishes it. Later, Bruce goes to Crime Alley, where his parents were murdered. There he silently asks for the mutants to kill him. Even the mutants themselves note that he seems into it. In a related note, Batman's reappearance is preceded by a flash of light and the sound of thunder. These two elemental forces are the gunshots that ended the lives of Bruce's parents and brought Batman into existence. It serves the same purpose in this story, but in a metaphorical manner. In fact, there are 2 flashes of thunder and lightning, one for each parent, that precedes Batman being seen in full. This connection also suggests that Batman is elemental in nature. He is the literal force of order over chaos. The beginning is the internal struggle between Bruce Wayne, the host, and Batman, the demon inside. Batman does not accept his crusade is over, especially not while Bruce still lives, and not while crime exists. Truly, the only ending for Bruce Wayne is to let go, to be consumed by the Batman. And by the conclusion of the first chapter, there is no Bruce Wayne left. He's faced himself, he's faced what's inside himself, and he accepts it. He doesn't assume the role of Batman, he becomes Batman. And Bruce Wayne simply disappears. In a metaphysical sense, that is. This is why Harvey Dent, Two-Face, is the necessary first villain. Both he and Bruce Wayne struggle with the dark parts of their soul. However, Harvey's forced reconciliation, the plastic surgery that makes him look normal, doesn't address the underlying darkness within. It's a surface-level alteration, like putting on a bat costume. Changing his face doesn't change what he is inside. It makes the symptoms worse until they manifest in self-destructive ways. Like Bruce Wayne, Harvey is effectively looking to die. It could be argued that Bruce and Harvey's paths are practically identical. Both are looking for an end. But the results are quite different because their journeys move in opposite directions. Bruce Wayne fully becomes Batman, and Two-Face fully becomes Harvey Dent. It should be noted, Frank Miller has said he didn't write Batman as a psychotic. By his definition, Batman is someone who, when he was very young, he had his entire world demolished so that it no longer made sense. Now he's forcing the world to make sense by fighting crime and thereby imposing order on the world. Despite Miller's view, being pathologically devoted to a single task and being willing to use whatever means necessary to accomplish that task is quite psychotic. It may be more accurate to suggest that Batman rejects the notion that he's psychotic. He views his actions as a rational response to the world he's involved with. In other words, violence met with a greater violent response is justifiable as long as one is righteous in their actions. Miller also stated, "The primary thing I think that has been lost is the mythic quality, the feeling of him being a demon." Taken together, this suggests that Batman, being a mythical hero, acts beyond the limiting confines of ordinary morals and laws, and by implication, outside the definition of rational behavior. It's open to interpretation whether he's literally possessed by a supernatural force, or whether he merely believes he met a presence in a cave that activated when his parents were murdered. To Miller, Batman isn't delusional, because a delusional person, or one who is purely psychotic, wouldn't function very well at their task. This position does seem to reflect Miller's own apparent dismissal of the mental health industry in general, which is a rather obvious running theme throughout Dark Knight. That being said, being delusional or psychotic doesn't preclude one from being effective at a specific task. Overall, the nature of Batman is widely open to interpretation and discussion. In the ensuing years since Dark Knight's publication, it could be argued that other writers have continued this debate within the Batman series. So, regardless of Miller's actual intent, this portrayal opened up an avenue of character discussion that's still being explored to the present day. The first fight with the mutant leader is there to introduce the necessity of Carrie Kelly, the latest iteration of Robin. Robin is not simply a soldier in training, but a balance of light to Batman's darkness. In a manner of speaking, Robin's presence grounds Batman, and she represents what he's fighting for, the future. Robin is a reminder that his crusade is not revenge. It's a selfless act to restore order for the next generation. This is where the element of fascism arises, because, in essence, Batman is training the next generation to adopt his principles and tactics to ensure his version of world order is maintained. Carrie Kelly is still forming as Robin, and by taking her in at this crucial moment, he ensures she's indoctrinated to his point of view. This element of fascism becomes even more apparent following the second fight with the mutant leader. It's not enough for Batman to defeat the mutant leader. He must be completely humiliated in front of his followers. Batman has to prove that his way, his force of will, is the only way. Through his victory, he inspires the witnesses to adopt his symbol and become his soldiers. This isn't a fight. It's a live-action recruitment poster. With that one victory, Batman reclaims Gotham for order. In the following chapter, Batman faces his nemesis, the Agent of Chaos, the Joker. It should be noted, between Dark Knight and The Killing Joke, the Joker was solidified as the equal and opposite reaction to Batman. Prior to this, the Joker was a unique, recurring villain, but not one that was canonized as his nemesis. The Joker resurfaces after a decade of being comatose. He simply deactivated, so to speak, because he was seemingly unnecessary without the Batman to oppose. Upon release, the Joker engages in a wanton killing spree. He raises the stakes of their ongoing struggle, and he challenges the Batman to play the game at his level. Now, it's hard not to notice that the Joker is gently portrayed as being sexually fluid, although it's not an element Miller explores with any depth. It's more of an ambiguous suggestion. Considering the social atmosphere of the era and the genre, there was likely unspoken reservations about committing too heavily to this character direction. It's hard to overlook this component, considering their final battle occurs in the Tunnel of Love. And it's fought with an intensity that is, to borrow a phrase from Alan Moore, borderline sexual hatred. It's intimate, passionate, and savage, with hard, repeated thrusting of a knife. That is, some pretty heavy subtext right there. This element could be viewed as an expression of elemental attraction. That is, both the Joker and Batman are forces of nature, order, and chaos that are drawn together in an attempt to cancel one another out. Again, considering the era and genre, this was likely the intention. In the last chapter, Batman has to face Superman. It's the final logical step in the escalation of events. In interviews, Miller has frequently stated that the pre-existing friendship between Superman and Batman never made sense. They're opposites in a variety of fundamental ways. For example, one is light, the other is dark. One is benevolent, the other is malevolent. Superman symbolizes the idea of a compassionate world, which is, in spirit, the foundation of America. Like his adopted country, Superman has become corrupt through a series of compromises, all of which were presumably made with the best intentions. Batman feels nothing but contempt for Superman and his subservience to a system that he believes to be corrupt. In Batman's opinion, Superman undermined his principles when he made a deal with the American government to become their secret weapon of choice. The tenets of truth and justice were put aside for the American way. Despite Superman's altruistic motivation, it was a compromise Batman believes he did not need to make. In less complex terms, Superman chose the wrong side of the war. He became part of the problem Batman exists to solve. Another major difference between Superman and Batman is this. Superman wants to maintain the world order. Batman wants to tear it down and build a better one. Superman sees the potential in the human race. Batman sees the totality of their failures. Their epic confrontation is inevitable, as is Superman's defeat, because, as powerful as he may be, Superman cannot defeat the metaphorical, elemental force of nature that Batman represents. In the end, Superman is humbled, and Batman is dead. Of course, Batman's death was a fake-out, but it was a necessary lie to end the escalating violence. As the guiding voice of the revolution, Batman had to die, so the revolution could continue unnoticed. Without eyes on it, the revolution can effect a meaningful change. As tragic as it is, it's also amazingly hopeful. My own unsupported interpretation of Batman's death is this. During the time his body laid in a state near death, the Batman, the demon inside Bruce Wayne, slipped away. What returns to life is Bruce Wayne with a renewed sense of purpose. Batman has fulfilled his intended role. He took on chaos and corruption, humbled his opponents, and won every battle worth fighting. Now, a semblance of order has been restored, and the time for rebuilding has begun. That requires a leader, not a malevolent, single-minded beast of destruction. There's one final point of comparison between Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns. Watchmen is precise. It's crafted so that all of the elements feed the narrative. and it strictly adheres to a 9-panel grid. Whereas The Dark Knight feels more organic, like a story being told rather than one that's being crafted. Like Watchmen, Dark Knight also uses a grid, but it's 16 panels. And it's used very loosely, which feeds into the feeling that it's more organic and not as rigidly structured as Watchmen. Watchmen has a very even clock-like pace, while Dark Knight's pace is more flexible, and it usually reflects the quick rhythm of an action story. Neither method is better than the other. They're simply slightly different methods used for different types of stories. One of the strengths of The Dark Knight Returns is it can be simply read as a straightforward action story, and it will be a satisfying experience, if that's all one is looking for in a story. Its layers and techniques aren't quite hidden, but they don't demand one's attention. And if they're overlooked, it won't make the reading experience underwhelming. In fact, it goes by so quickly and feels so complete, one feels compelled to return to it time and again, slowing it down and seeing the actual craft built into the story. It also includes some defining character beats that are still being explored to this day, and there are some interesting ambiguities, such as the fate of Jason Todd and how Oliver Queen lost his arm. There's also the sudden disappearance of all the superheroes. None of these factors are explained explicitly, nor do they need to be, but they do have some interesting implications. For the record, there are 2 official sequels and a prequel. They've been acknowledged for the sake of due diligence. Proceed with caution. In the end, the influence of The Dark Knight Returns, not simply on Batman, but on the superhero genre, is undeniable. It has a deceptive level of sophistication not ordinarily seen in the genre. It has a nearly perfect level of escalation, followed by a satisfying conclusion. It's an epic story, told with epic characters, fighting for something worthwhile. That's it for today. Like, subscribe, and comment, and I will talk at you later. Until next time.